I don't know, everything that all of my questions that I had about theology, about religion, were being answered.
Yeah.
Every time I opened the Book of Mormon or the Doctrine of Covenants, it would all be answered. And I'm like, wow. Like, I always wondered, did people become angels, or like what is going on there? And Doctrine of Covenants has some answers, saying that angels, I don't know, I don't have to tell you, but angels are like glorified beings as well.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Saints Unscripted. We are here with Zach Black, right? That's
Yeah.
your name. Yeah. Okay. I'm pretty unfamiliar with you. We just started talking right now. I've read a little bit about your story, but when I read people's stories, I try to kind of recycle them pretty quickly, because I want to hear it from you. So
Right.
I'm excited to hear your story. And if I understand correctly, you are not currently a Latter-day Saint.
I'm not an official member, but I've been reading the Book of Mormon, Doctrine of Covenants, and Pearl of Great Price for around 4 or 5 months now.
Okay.
Um, I've been moving around a lot in my life, so I haven't really had a chance to settle down on one church. But
Okay.
I've talked to missionaries, got introduced by somebody I know, and we had really good conversations, and it kind of vibed with what I was missing in my theological search.
Okay. So let's get into that then. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us how old you are, if you're going to school, or what's going on in your life, and then let's get into kind of your spiritual journey.
Cool. I'm 26 years old. I have gone in and out of college. I've had a rough time staying in, but I plan on going back in the spring for philosophy and psychology. So I want to be a chaplain. That's a pretty big thing to want to be, because it takes like 6 years. So I mean, it's a goal. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm kind of starting late in the whole college game.
What school are you wanting to go to?
So I want to go to first a community college in my hometown. I live in Southwest Washington, and I want to get my bachelor's in or at BYU.
Okay.
So
What
because
if
I figured what was that?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, because I kind of figured, if I'm going to be a chaplain, and like if I'm going to help people, I want to do it in the right philosophical lens. So if I'm going to be a Mormon, like an official Mormon getting baptized and everything, I want to be in the right mindset. I want to um, make sure that I'm going to be telling people the right things. And so, and I'm always interested in like learning new philosophies and learning new um, theo- theological practices. So the Mormons, for me, is probably the best theological movement I've ever seen. So it's
Hey, I did not pay you to say that.
For
So, okay, so you said you're Southwest Washington. What town are you in, if I might
Longview,
ask?
Washington.
Okay, is that close to Tri-Cities?
No, you know what's funny is I actually lived near Tri-Cities not too long ago. I was
Okay.
living in Washington, and I just moved back to
Oh,
Southwest.
Southwest. I got my directions wrong. Okay. Oh,
Oh, no, it's all good.
I'm from Hermiston, Oregon. So
Oh,
just
really?
across the
I
river.
just passed through Hermiston like
Yeah, well,
2 days.
that's what you do with Hermiston. You pass through and that's it. So anyway, so have you seen our episode we did on with a chaplain as a guest?
I did. I just watched that like a few days ago. I thought it
Okay.
was really cool. I wanted to go in the military, but my mental health issues kind of got in the way of that.
Okay. So then let's go back then and talk about kind of your religious background. Where you're interested in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You've been reading up on it. You've been watching our videos, I hope. Um,
Yeah.
what sparked your interest?
So, oh man. So I grew up pretty. I didn't go to church as a kid really until I was about 14. My mom told me when I was a kid that I could just talk to God she called him God the Father, which I think is interesting. She's not a Mormon. She never knew anything about Mormon theology, but a lot of her beliefs kind of match up with the Mormon beliefs. And I think that's interesting. But I keep saying Mormon, I mean Latter-day Saint. I apologize for that.
You're
It's
fine.
kind of a habit. Okay, cool. But, you know, I grew up with a lot of anxiety, and I would pray to God all the time, and I felt a deep connection with him. And I was baptized in a Baptist church when I was about 14. I fell out of it like a year later. Started smoking marijuana. I started drinking. I started doing all the bad stuff you're not supposed to do. I got in with the wrong people, and you know, I was lost for quite some time. I became an atheist, and then I became a Buddhist, and then I became a Hindu, and then I became all these different philosophies I was looking into, all these different religions I was looking into, and I got really spiritually lost for about 10 years. I thought I found God again, but it was a more Gnostic kind of line of thinking, which is like, which looking back now, I'm like, oh man, that's not good. That's not a good line of thinking. So I got away from that, became an atheist again. Got into meditation. I got into the Kabbalah, occultism, mysticism, thinking that I could gain knowledge myself through psychedelics, through meditation, all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until I was about 24 when everything kind of crashed down in my life that I began to realize that there probably was a higher being watching over me, because I got through a lot of stuff kind of unscathed, really. Physically unscathed, maybe not mentally, but
it sounds like you went through some traumatizing experiences that could have resulted much worse than the results of which could have been much worse than they turned out to be. And
exactly.
It sounds like you kind of got thinking, you know, somebody's looking out for me through all this.
Exactly. That's perfectly said. Because, you know, I'm just going to say it. This one time, I went to, well, my hometown, and I went to a bar and I started drinking, and I blacked out, and I stumbled out of the bar. And for about 5 to 6 hours, I just wandered around, blacking out in and out. And it was probably the most terrifying experience of my life. It made me really think afterwards that somebody actually was looking after me. Like, I was alone that whole time, and my roommate ended up finding me, and I didn't want to live anymore. I was in the lowest part of my life, and my best friend, still my best friend today, she helped me through it. She brought me back to the apartment. She was kind of freaked out a little bit, obviously, but she was very understanding, and, you know, gave me water, gave me something to eat, all that kind of stuff. And I about a few months later, I went to therapy and went to counseling, and I had to go into inpatient. So for about a week, I was learning about, you know, God. I was learning about different ways of thinking, and it really sparked me on the path to finding God again. Like when I was a kid, I used to be able to talk to him all the time, and I felt a deep connection. And it wasn't until I was about 24 that started, or 23, that started to change. And after that experience, I thought I was a Baptist, you know, I thought I was a Catholic. I went to looking into the Anglican community. I looked into Lutheran. I looked into a lot of different kinds of Christianity, and none of them made me feel like I did when I was a kid. I got into, well, okay, let me back up a little bit. I got into the occult probably when I was about 16 years old.
Okay.
I started, well, it turned into Luciferianism, but at first it was just magical thinking that I had control over my life completely, that it was up to me. it was all about me, like I was in control. I had the power to change my life. And it turned into Gnosticism, like I said, but it eventually turned into me worshiping the wrong God. I was worshiping Lucifer. I was praying to him. I was writing down sigils. I was doing all these things that you're supposed to do in that church to find happiness, basically, because it promised happiness and peace. But I was getting worse. I was mentally getting worse, and I was pretending that I was getting better.
I feel like your journey is building towards something. Like you've been through all these ups and downs, through all in and out of all these different faiths. How did you find our faith?
So I was working as a caregiver over in Eastern Washington, actually in Idaho at this point, kind of on the border of Idaho and Washington. And I was working in a nursing home, and I found like this, my heart was opening to, I was working with dementia patients, and I realized that my patients, like me being able to sit for long periods of time, my love was growing, my anxiety was going away, and I realized like I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And that job didn't work out for a few reasons, so I ended up doing in-home caregiving, caring for this boy with cerebral palsy, and they were Mormons. And his mom, was like, "Hey, do you believe in God?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Because at that point I did believe in God. It was just my own version of what I thought God was. And she was like, "Hey, have you heard of the Book of Mormon? Have you read that?" Like, "No, I haven't." I actually knew nothing about like the Book of Mormon at that point.
So you hadn't been taught, like a lot of people growing up in different faiths are like taught to avoid it, or to, they're told different negative things about our faith. Did that happen to you, or were you just completely oblivious to our faith?
Honestly, my grandma was like, "Stay away from Mormonism" when I was a kid. She did say that, and I just always kind of stayed away from like. I lumped you. Okay, so this is, I lumped you guys in with like other religions. So I lumped you guys in with the same view as like Scientologists. That level of like that level of of rejection. And it wasn't until this boy's mom, she opened up the Book of Mormon and started reading it to me, and it just like, it's like, what? That's what it says? That's what you believe? Like, you believe that? Because my mom always told me there were 3 different levels of heaven, and that's just something I always believed in. I don't know. She doesn't know where it came from. She does, like, I don't know where it came from, and it was just. So I always believed that, and when I heard her say that there's 3 degrees of glory, I was like, wait a minute. Like,
that sounds familiar.
Yeah, that sounds really familiar. And it just, when I heard Joseph Smith's story about him struggling to find the right church, and when I heard that God spoke to him directly, it just hit me different. When I actually heard it coming from somebody who has this conviction about it, I don't know, it made me feel like I was a kid again. Like, it made me feel like I had a connection with God immediately when she was talking about it. And I was like, oh, I got to get myself one of these books. She gave one to me.
I'm sure she did.
Yeah. And we talked about it for months, every single time I would go over and help her kid, like, do what we need to do, get him ready for school. After that, we would just talk. She would read stuff to me. She really was doing missionary work just with me, and it felt right. It felt like I was home again. It felt like I found like this peace within me when she was talking about the Book of Mormon and just reading from it. And she was like, okay, pray to God, ask him if this is the true church. And whatever you feel in your heart, like, if you feel like convicted about it, if you feel like it is actual truth that is speaking to you, then it's the right church for you. It's the right church. And I started reading the Book of Mormon. I didn't read the whole thing, but I got kind of antsy with it. I'm not good with with reading full books. So I have to usually like open up to a random chapter and like read and see what it has to say. And it wasn't until I got into the Doctrine of Covenants that's where the true magic started happening for me, because I always thought, like, what is God? Is he the Trinity? Is he just one mystical, omnipotent being that I can't understand, that he's just like too alien for me to feel connected to? Like, that's what it felt like. Like when I was into Catholics and the Lutheran Church and all that stuff, it didn't really speak to me. I felt like God wasn't personal,
Yeah. It's hard to have a connection with a being that like you can't even visualize what that being is,
Exactly. And it didn't speak to me at all. And it wasn't good. But it wasn't until she said that God had a body of flesh and bone, and that he was a resurrected being, a glorified being, that I could communicate to because of Jesus, because of his son. And it just made me, I don't know, everything that all of my questions that I had about theology, about religion, were being answered. Yeah. Every time I opened the Book of Mormon or the Doctrine of Covenants, it would all be answered. And I'm like, wow. Like, I always wondered, did people become angels, or like what is going on there? And Doctrine of Covenants has some answers, saying that angels, I don't have to tell you, but angels are like glorified beings as well, or resurrected beings, I guess. And that's interesting to me, because my mom always told me that two things: we existed before we were born in heaven with God, and some people become angels. And I thought that was interesting, because
sounds like she had some missionaries visit her at some point or something.
I'm gonna have to ask her about that, because I don't know. It's strange, because she just would tell me these things, and when I was a kid, I believed it. And so, I'll have to ask her about the missionary thing. I know some missionaries have come to visit her, but I don't know if they were Mormons or not.
Yeah, because pre-mortality, I mean, that's not something that a lot of faiths believe in. And it's so interesting, like it's hard for members who have grown up in the church. We don't realize this as much, but like there's so many things like that you're talking about that are different from mainstream Christianity or Catholicism, who I also consider Christian, but another story. But there are things like you hear about them and you're like, oh, that's different. Oh, but that makes a lot of sense, actually. Right. And that's something that I love about our faith, is that, so there have been so many moments where things have just clicked, and you're like, oh, of course that's the way it is. Like that makes complete sense.
I was reading parts of it in the Doctrines of Covenants, and I started to feel this overwhelming feeling of joy. I don't know how to explain it. It was like, because I deal with a lot of depression. I was diagnosed with bipolar a few years ago, and depression has been a huge part of my life. Just dealing with really low moods, suicidal thoughts, a lot of bad stuff. And one time I was living alone. I wasn't around my family, didn't have any friends in the place I was at, didn't know anybody. You can cut this out if you want, but I was kind of done with life. I didn't want to live anymore. So I was planning on taking my life, and I asked God, I was like, if you're not going to take away my depression, I will. And what was, oh man, what was cool is that it went away. My depression, not completely, I still deal with it all the time, but my depression went away that moment. I asked him that, it just went away. I felt joy. I called my mom. I started freaking out, started crying, and I was like, God was listening to me. He actually does listen to us, and prayer does help. And it's from that moment, I just never stopped praying. I pray every single day, because I know that he won't always take it away, but he will occasionally take it away. And I think my mental illness now, to me, like before, I thought I was I was seeing myself as a victim, and I didn't understand why I was suffering so much. But now, the reason why I want to become a chaplain is I think that God puts us through certain things to try to make us help people in similar situations. You know, like if we can trust him in our darkest moments, and it actually helps, you know, you can spread that message to other people, and you can possibly help others in the same way that others have helped me and God has helped me. So that's kind of where my story led to, was that moment. And that's like the biggest moment that's ever happened with me with the connection to God. It was mind blowing.
It's fascinating that you bring that up. I don't know. Did you know that the Book of Mormon agrees with you on that? It talks about how God gives us weaknesses so that we can so that we're humble, one, but also so that those weaknesses eventually can become strengths in our lives. It sounds like that's what you're describing to me, is that you've gone through these rough times, but now because of those rough times, you're able to help people through similar situations.
I did not know the Book of Mormon said that. You just gave me chills.
I'll have to send you the verse. I think it's in the Book of Ether, but yeah, I'll send it to you. But yeah,
it's
one of my favorite teachings from the Book of Mormon.
You know, I have more hope than I ever have in my life, and all of it is from you guys, like from the LDS community. It's like I can feel your non-judgment towards me, and I think that's important, to like listen to people wholeheartedly without outwardly like mocking them or judging them or anything like that. And that's what I found with the Mormon community. You know, like no one is going to judge me, at least not tell me that they're judging me, but you know what I mean?
We'll just do it behind your back.
Yeah, no.
But I'm glad that you found that in your congregation. Of course, they're imperfect people all over the place, and there are people that feel differently than you do about their, you know, wards and stuff. But
right.
But obviously, like we're trying to practice what we preach, and
Exactly.
and what we're preaching is, you know, love others as God loves us.
You know, like I said earlier a little bit, I dealt with alcoholism, and I went to AA, and I didn't do any of the steps. Like I literally did the first step and then skipped to the 8th one, and I was like, all right, I'm done. And it was not a good idea, because I struggled immensely after that. I ended up going back, doing the full steps, and that really did help me find some connection with the divine being. But I will always remember, I won't say her name, but the woman that taught me about the Book of Mormon, like I'll always remember her, because she just shifted my life in a completely new direction without even realizing that's what she was doing. Because she didn't know about my struggles, my problems. She was just spreading the good word. And I was like, man, she doesn't realize how much she's changed. If I could talk to her today, I would definitely give her a big hug. Because I don't know. I feel grateful that people actually care enough to care for others, you know?
Yeah.
Because I have a pretty negative outlook on life.
Yeah.
For quite some time, but it's looking up, you know?
Love to hear it. And it sounds like what I love about this story is it sounds like this woman was normal about it. Like in our faith, we emphasize, you know, member missionary work, like talk about your faith with people. And we oftentimes get freaked out by that, because we think that it means we have to go knocking on people's doors, or just be like stiff and formal and like with the Book of Mormon in our hand. But it sounded like she was just like, hey man, so do you believe in God? What's your background? Have you heard of the Book of Mormon? And it sounds like she didn't put a lot of pressure on you or put you in a tough spot.
No,
with how she approached it.
She really didn't. She made me feel open to ask questions. I saw uh, the Modern Prophet on her wall, and I was like, who's that? Like, who's that guy? And she told me about him, and she was like, look up, go on, I forget what website it was, but go on this website and, you'll read about him and know kind of who the prophets are. And everything that he said really vibed with me. It was amazing. I downloaded the app, the Gallery of Latter-day Saints. I forget what the app is called, but it's
the Gospel Library
yeah,
app?
yeah. And I was looking through that and listening to the conferences, and then I realized that, oh wow, I can learn all about this theology without having to go to 8 years of like school. I will go to school for however long this takes me to learn about the LDS theology, but I mean, like, I don't have to pay so much money. Like, that you're telling me that this stuff is free. They work for free. They don't, like, the priests don't get paid. That's amazing. Like they actually care. My biggest point for rejecting Christianity in the past was saying, like, well, God allows all this suffering and then he just sends us to hell.
Mm.
And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And it never did. And that's why I rejected most of it. And it wasn't until I learned about the three degrees of glory, and that God is actually more compassionate, more loving than we ever could imagine. And that he won't send us to hell just for suffering, for feeling bad, for drinking, for stuff like that. I mean, it depends on what you mean. Like, the spirit world, or the third heaven, or whatever you want to call it, can be hell, I guess, because you got to pay for what you've done yourself, and that could be not good. But the fact that it's not forever is what really got me. It's like, okay, so he is loving, he is compassionate, he's not going to let us suffer forever.
Yeah. And even if you do end up in the lowest of the three kingdoms of glory, and even if you are there forever, it's still infinitely better than what we have here. And it's
right.
not this fiery pit where you've got demons poking you and you're just suffering all the time.
And that's what I was taught. I don't mean to talk ill will of my grandma. She struggles with mental illness a lot, so I get why she believes some of the things she believes, but she would always tell me that when I was a kid, like, if you get a tattoo, you're going to hell, if you, like, all this stuff. And it just didn't vibe with me. I couldn't understand. I was like, if my parents will give me more than second chances to make things right, then that means they're
God.
Yeah, why wouldn't God? And it just blew my mind, and it continues to blow my mind what I keep learning every single time I open the Book of Mormon. It's and I started watching the videos on YouTube that they have of the Book of Mormon,
mm-hmm.
and that really helped me visualize it and put it in like a frame, to where when I read the book, I would actually be able to visualize what's going on.
Yeah,
and like I said, it just keeps me on a level playing field to where I'm not so depressed all the time.
So why the heck aren't you baptized, man? What's going on there?
So I I was living in Pullman, Washington for a while, and I was trying to find a job there, got an apartment, had a job with caregiving, had this mental crisis, which actually was one that I was talking about earlier. But I had a mental crisis that really set me back, and I couldn't work anymore. And so I had to move back to my hometown. And so the church I was involved with in Pullman, I was going to get baptized at, but I had to move. So now I'm back in Longview, Washington. And I'm trying to find a church. And once I do and get associated with them, learn a little bit more, I definitely want to be baptized with it. Well, I mean, I don't know how long it takes, but within the next few months, I want to be baptized. I feel like it's time,
Have the missionaries met up with you in your new location yet?
No, I haven't. Honestly, like, it was a few days ago I moved back, and I haven't reached out to any missionaries here yet. After this conversation, I will. That's for sure.
If you run into any obstacles, let me know and I'll get you connected.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know. Are you familiar with the meeting house locator tool on the church's website? You just put in your address and it tells you exactly where the church building is and what ward you belong to. And anyways, we can talk about that off camera, but I'll get you hooked up.
Oh, sweet, man. Thank you.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
One last question that I have is, it sounds like you've been through a lot of different faiths: Baptist faith, Catholic faith, Hindu faith, Buddhist faith, Luciferian faith. Is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints going to end up just as another item on this list?
That's what I thought when I first started talking to this lady. And, I was like, oh, it's just another faith. It's just another idea. I don't know how to explain it. Other than I feel like I'm being shared secrets. I'm being spoken, I'm being told truth for the first time. And I feel more of a conviction towards God. I'm talking to him every day. I feel like we are literal children of God. I feel like I don't just feel it. I feel like I know it now. It's kind of weird. I feel like it's more of a knowing that God is actually there, that Jesus Christ is his actual son. We're his children. He cares for us. He had a plan for us. I've never felt this way with any of the other faiths. I had to ignore parts I didn't agree with and just make up my own version of it in my head. And I don't feel the need to do that with this. I feel like every time I read it, I'm being told a secret. I'm being told hey, this is how it actually is. All the other faiths brought you to here. Don't go back to the other faiths. You are right where you need to be. And that's kind of how I feel now. And I think it's different because I've never felt this way before.
All right, Zach. Well, thank you for that. You've been great. I'm excited for what the future holds for you. And to all of our viewers, if you've got questions for Zach, drop them in the comments section, and we will see you guys next time.